Let me address the chairman, Professor Dr. Dinesh Singh, also the very eminent Professor Rajneesh Jain, Dr. Anoop Singh, and also the very eminent vice chancellors who are present today. Let me say that this is the biggest question. As I sit here today in Adelaide, in Australia, I must mention this is the most important question before all the universities across the globe. Is our education in crisis? And the topic which I am asked to speak on is towards the global best practices in learning and teaching in these pandemic times. So let me recall what Krista McAuliffe, the late astronomer, had to say. She was a teacher above all, as you all may be knowing. She said, "I touch the future, I teach." Perhaps no one had ever thought of the looming disaster of the COVID-19 pandemic. Yes, universities have faced major challenges in the past, such as was in the wake of the technotronic age, the onset of the moot courses a couple of years back, and have undergone major transformations, not only in their functions, nature and scope, but also in the teaching and learning processes. Let us take a brief on how the governance structures have changed in the teaching and learning process. They have not changed at all. Let me tell you this across the globe. And the truth is that knowledge dissemination, fostering innovation, creativity and innovation, also imagination, remains first and foremost in our economy. I should mention this very important thing, that the engine for social change in any country and the economic development is the university education, higher education, the university government linkages, which we know as the triple helix. In India particularly, there are issues intimately tied to the regulatory framework, the governance metrics of universities, because we do have a federal polity here. I should mention that the regulatory framework gives very little scope for much change, much engineering or much transformation in the teaching and learning process in India at least. There is more of monitoring, less of facilitation. Of course, there is also a little lack of autonomy, both private as well as public. Also, I should say, when it comes to comparing India with the West, when it comes to the teaching and learning process, in India too, there has been a race for practice-based learning, developing an industry-university interface for better placements and employability. However, that is being questioned across the globe. I should say that it is argued the real danger in trying the university too closely to immediately industry needs and labor markets really curbs any innovation or any imagination. From India's perspective, as tuition fee increase and public funding of the universities gets tied to the ratings as such, driven more by indicators such as placements, I mentioned, employability quotients, also the infrastructure or the quality imperatives, they are very much, I would say, shackled, the universities in India. Indeed, many students are already judging higher education as a poor economic investment in the West, and same would apply in India also in near future. Well, it is often quoted that mediocre teacher tells, the good teacher explains, the superior teacher demonstrates, the great teacher actually inspires. So the question now is whether we are good enough in inspiring and demonstrating. Yes, let me cite from my own experience. I have learned as a student at Swinburne in Australia and later taught at Monash University, where once it was felt that the evolving teaching and learning process is something which is in operation. The question was being asked, and now more so in this pandemic, whether university education is all a good investment for good life, good citizenship in the new century, whether it's a good value for money. In fact, there was a report by Ernst & Young in Australia in 2012, which is valid even now, and it argues that the dominant university model in Australia and rest of the countries in the West has been based on a broad teaching learning based institution supported by a large asset base and a large predominantly in-house back office, which of course, as we all know, has become very, very unviable in the pandemic. Let me also talk about a little different things. One of them is the key challenge for higher education, whereas our country in this pandemic is forced not only here but again elsewhere also into remote learning and teaching. Now, when it comes to online or remote learning or blended learning as we are calling it in India, let me say that there is a lot of technological change. There is intense competition and also competition resourcing, and we have to ensure that we keep learning, because it is important that learning, unlearning and then relearning is equally important. I would just mention from Plutarch, the famous Greek philosopher, who once said, "The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. And to kindle that fire, we at times may need the brick and mortar of teaching and learning." And to this end, I would say that yes, online is important, but we do need a little bit of brick and mortar so that we can inspire the students, kindle that thirst for knowledge. Let me also go to the root issue of the teaching and learning process in our country, which in contrast to elsewhere abroad, we follow the basic paradigm in higher education, which is from the Bloom's taxonomy, which is modified from time to time. It was Benjamin Bloom who and his collaborators who had listed the 6 major categories: knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis and evaluation as very important. In our new education policy 2020, I should quote that we have tried to really address these issues such as critical thinking and imagination, and also the need for value education, character building and meaning making. But I should say, because I was also there when it was 1986 education policy, and there has been a lot of change in our thinking now. It is much more modern, much more progressive, I would say, and much more revolutionary also. So the question now remains whether value education, character building, which are so critical to a diverse country like India, where we can do what Albert Einstein once said, it is the supreme art of the teacher to awaken joy in the creative expression of knowledge. I should take you on to something different also, and also address what kind of learners we have, what are their needs, what are the modes of delivery, and what would be most appropriate for a preferred course. So in that understanding, let me come straight away to what Peter Drucker, the great management consultant, had to say. He said that teaching is the only major occupation of man for which we have not yet developed the tools that make an average person capable of competence and performance. In teaching, we rely on the naturals, the ones who somehow know how to teach. But there is yet a lot to learn. And yes, indeed. Now, when you talk about learning, I can list a number of technologies which are there and which are evolving yet, which many universities have adopted, which we have adopted in our university in India. And that is, I can, even despite the repetition, I would like to cite. These are the Blackboard, the Moodle, Desire to Learn, Canvas. Synchronous technologies are also there, such as the Blackboard Collaborate, the Adobe Connect, and the Big Blue Button. Lecture recording technologies such as podcasts and lecture capture, like the one on which I am here today with you, where we use tablets and mobile devices such as iPads, mobile phones and apps. MOOCs and their many variants, spooks or tooks, as you all must be knowing, and these are also being used in universities here abroad. I should talk about the social media as blogging softwares are evolving, wikis, Google Hangouts, Google Documents and Twitter. There are many apps and tools which are learner generated, such as the e-portfolios. These are important, as you know, for the architects, for the engineers, and even for art students. Critical new advances have taken place in new technology and the teaching learning process for higher education abroad, which include consumer technologies such as 3D video drones, the virtual 3D imaging, electronic publishing mode apps, quantified self-tablet computing, telepresence, and of course wearable technology and the internet technologies such as cloud computing, the internet of things, real-time translation, semantic applications, single sign-on syndication tools such as media technologies, collaborative environments, collective intelligence, and crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, digital identity networks, tacit intelligence, digital strategies such as bring your own device, BYOD. It's already happening in India in most industries. Flipped classrooms, games and gamification, using location intelligence market spaces, preservation and conservation technologies, learning technologies such as badges, microcredit, learning analytics, and massive open online courses which rely more and more on the digital mode. Using mobile learning, online learning, open content, open licensing, virtual and remote laboratories, visualization technologies such as the 3D printing, which is already happening, rapid prototyping, augmented reality. I think many of us must have seen this, especially in the IITs. The information visualization, which is already happening, such as visual data analysis, volumetric and holographic displays, and enabling technologies such as visual data analysis. I would talk about other technologies which are also known as enabling technologies. These are affecting computing, machine learning, mesh networks, mobile broadband, and natural user interfaces. Near field communication, next generation batteries, open hardware, speech to speech translation, statistical machine translation, virtual assistants, and also wireless power. Here I would reiterate that anywhere in the world, he who dares to teach must never cease to learn and not to forget our own Mahatma Gandhi. He had once said, live as if you were to die tomorrow and learn as if you have to live forever. And to that end, I would say that for our teachers, it is now the new normal. Better we adapt and adopt these new technologies and be good learners. Also, post-COVID-19 teaching and learning process and pedagogy will be disruptive. It's happening, and that will bring the new normal. And this is a decisive change in higher education through an online and virtual learning to start with, followed by blended learning and internships. My favorite poet Robert Frost once said, I am not a teacher. He was actually a teacher, but I am an awakener. And this applies to all of us here. The teachers and the universities have to be adaptive, have to be flexible. They have to provide real-time feedback and support to the students in smaller groups and peer-to-peer learning. The integration of pedagogy, technology, and virtual reality of the new normal will define the future for us and will be the emerging model of blended teaching and learning. And learning is always active, with particular attention being paid to remote mobility, flexibility, and multiple device usage. Also, there has to be a fusion between the technology, device, and the humans, who are the teachers actually. To conclude, let me quote what Ataturk had once said for all the teachers to remember. I would say that a good teacher is like a candle. It consumes itself to light and to show the way forward to others. I would say that the real challenge before us in the new normal has to be taken by the horns so that we become and we usher in the new positive in the new age if post-COVID times. In the end, let me take this opportunity to thank Professor Ranbir Singh, the Vice Chancellor of National Law University of Delhi, and also Dr. Pankaj Mittal, the Secretary General of AIU, for having visualized and conceived the various thematic sessions of this convention of the Vice Chancellors, and I'm sure it will be a great takeaway for all of us. So I should thank you all. Thank you so much.